Hello, UnConf. I'm Catherine Meade, and I'm a technical director at Sparkbox. In my role, I support the delivery of products both by managing production team members and by leading project and client teams. I'm here today to talk with you about how you can support developers and production team members as a product champion. As Drew has already defined for you, a product champion is the singular person accountable for the success or failure of a product. We tend to approach this role from a business perspective, where the product champion is primarily reporting progress to business stakeholders. However, it is also the product champion's role to support the production team they work with. If you're a product champion attending this talk, you probably work with developers, engineers, or other production team members on a regular basis. These team members can be in-house talent, or they can be external consultants like us at Sparkbox. The health of those team members directly affects the quality of the product you build together. I'd like to share with you 4 ways a product champion can support the developers they work with. These include prioritizing clear outcome goals where everyone knows and understands what success looks like, enforcing scope to keep your estimates accurate and your budgets on track, listening to developers and trusting their expertise, and remembering quality assurance every step of the way. Let's get into it. I do my best work when I have a clear idea of what it looks like to succeed. Product champions are the folks who either define success or at the very least they communicate what success is to the team. The easiest way to ensure a team understands what success looks like is to add a definition of done to every task or ticket. Whether you use Jira tickets or a different way to track work, the definition of done is typically a sentence or 2 included in the work description. It explains the behavior of the application after the work is complete. While a tech lead or someone else may write the description, the product champion should agree on the definition of done before assigning the ticket to the team. In this example, the definition of done includes 3 criteria: how the text should be styled with a link to the design spec, how the component functions, as well as required accessibility considerations. But not every discussion results in a unified team understanding. When disputes happen, it's the product champion's job to step in and choose a path forward for the team. I see this often when there are several experienced developers on a single production team. Differences in opinion on how to accomplish team goals will surface whenever you have a lot of smart people in the same room. The champ may defer to technical leadership where appropriate, such as a tech lead, but ultimately, a product champion casts the tie-breaking vote for product decisions. If the choice made turns out to be the wrong one, it's the product champion who takes responsibility. Having a single person settle disputes allows the team to make progress toward completing work. Clear definitions of work are just one part of defining outcome goals. A team also needs to understand what success looks like for an engagement. We had a client a few years ago that brought us a legacy codebase, and they wanted help improving the process to update it. We had only a few weeks to dive in, update a few pages, document our findings on the process, and make suggestions for improvements. True consulting work. We were thrown right into the thick of it, piling into the Sparkbox team room, pairing directly and in person with their developers, eating pizza together, and converting hundreds of page views as best we could in what looked like an insurmountable task. Developers on both sides of that project left feeling uneasy and like they didn't get much done. We'd only migrated maybe 50 pages of over 600. The client stakeholder and leadership on both teams thought the engagement went great. We had delivered a large document of recommendations on how to speed up the rest of the planned pages. The misalignment came because we didn't have a defined product champion, and therefore no one had shared a clear definition of success with the people actually doing the work. If we had had someone in that role, the team would have understood that our written recommendations were just as valuable to the client stakeholders as the code everyone wrote. The client team would have set the context for exactly why we joined them in their work. Since then, we've all been much more intentional about sharing our goals for each engagement with our individual contributors on both teams. A product champion can really shine by ensuring everyone knows what success looks like. Generally, the team has put together an estimated budget and timeline of a specific scope of work based on a shared understanding of project goals, and it's up to the product champion to keep that scope aligned or gain approval to extend the budget or deadline. Scope creep is when additional features or other work that is unaccounted for in the original project plan is added to the scope. Fighting against scope creep can seem like a full-time job, but it must be mitigated in order to protect the production team from missing deadlines. Scope creep can link into a project in several ways. Most commonly, a business stakeholder requests new features be added late in the timeline, such as a flashy header or an additional web page. Other times, the creep is from design revision, animation, or other unaccounted for design specification not captured in the initial feature description. Developers aren't innocent either, and I'm totally guilty of this. Quite a bit of increased scope can be added through dev chores like refactoring. A trick I was taught in my very early days as a developer for when I've been given too many tasks is to ask the person assigning me tasks to help me prioritize against everything else they've asked me to do. This works for business stakeholders as well. When presented with a feature request for a project with a finite budget, a product champion could ask, "What are you willing to cut in order to add this feature?" This helps everyone realign priorities and protects your developers from extra crunch. You may be inclined to combat scope creep by adding more people to your team. Teams with large budgets but short deadlines often like to throw more people at the problem. However, increasing team size comes with the cost of training the new team members, as well as requiring technical leadership to increase the amount of work available in the sprint through writing more tickets, reviewing more code, decomping at a faster rate, etc. Onboarding, pairing, synchronous meetings, vacation and sick leave, and other strains on the production team's time adds up quickly, and a product champion must understand these factors and work with leadership to see if adding more headcount is actually going to increase your productivity. The product champion is the primary line of defense when it comes to protecting a team from scope creep. If the team ends up over budget or out of time due to overcommitment of features, it's the product champion who's responsible. Unfortunately, a lot of scope creep happens when developers start sneaking in additional work into their tickets. They may feel like asking for time to implement fixes or if factors won't be prioritized. Therefore, it's also important to make a project a safe space for voicing development's needs and having those requests prioritized in a reasonable way, which leads me to my next point. Development teams are subject matter experts in building products. Product champions working with developers have to build trust with their developers by listening to them and making room for developer requests. The work we do is typically measured in additive code and feature releases. We work on a release, ship it, and then immediately move on to the next new thing. Prioritizing work that is exciting to business often means cutting features to refactor and improve what already exists. Developer quality of life improvements like refactoring and reducing technical debt not only keep the team motivated, they increase quality for a flexible and more reliable codebase to support business needs. Legacy codebases, like so many of us work on, need regular maintenance. Tech debt can be removing those to-do comments in the code itself, implementing linting or other automated testing, including code coverage, updating security and package versions, or speeding up the build pipeline to make shipping work faster overall. Several of our clients like to employ an 80-20 split of every work. 80% of the work is toward new features, 20% is allocated to whatever efforts the production teams finds the most important. Other clients will dedicate one sprint every 5 or so to just reducing technical debt. These regular intervals to work on tech debt keep developers from increasing scope by sneaking in changes that they honestly need to complete in order to continue working. Other than making time for tech debt, product champions can support dev team members by accurately estimating work. Many of our teams employ some version of Agile or Scrum management, which regularly includes an estimation effort. Estimation is where each task is sized relative to the effort it will take to complete. You may know this by the term story pointing. Even though this can be a time-consuming practice, it is extremely important to include the entire developer team in these meetings. The effort to complete a task can vary widely across the team's skill set and years of experience. Leadership is not typically a representative sample of the full team, and therefore, if the only person estimating tasks is a tech lead, the estimates are likely to be inaccurate, which means the entire project can end up off schedule. It's wonderful to include the entire dev team in estimation efforts. It's also important to trust the team when they size an effort. Developers are the closest people to the work we do, and typically they have the most applicable expertise in how things are built and how long it takes to accomplish any given task. Another excellent way to support developers as a product champion is to hear them when they suggest simpler or more accessible alternatives, and then communicate those changes to appropriate parties. Does your page really need that fancy carousel? Or would a card grid work just as well? Do you have to have that fully custom select, or can you use a native drop-down menu? Can we use a charting library rather than build that graph from scratch? Reducing the complexity of web elements when possible can alleviate some burden on the dev team to build fragile, complicated experiences, which translates to fewer bugs for them to fix too. And speaking of bugs, don't underestimate the power of quality assurance as a mechanism of supporting your production teams. Nothing quite compares to the quiet despair of starting a new sprint and seeing a large amount of red bug tickets. On many Agile and Scrum teams, bug fixes aren't even story-pointed. They're not new work, but rather work that should have been completed before. Bugs typically pile up near the end of a project when quality assurance or QA has finally gained access to a product before launch. Many of our clients account for a couple weeks of bug fixes before a major deadline, and if you're not, you should be. But it can still be uncomfortable for developers to be inundated with broken or unusable code and interfaces. A product champion can be a voice for including checks at all levels of the process, reducing strain on production team members. Browser testing, accessibility features, usability testing, and design polish are all common practices in building the web. Also common is our tendency to cut these things to make room for more features. As the old adage says, you can only get two. Build something fast, build it cheap, or build it well. Product champions may feel more comfortable choosing fast and cheap because that is often what stakeholders say they want, but is rarely the best choice for our products. All teams have different needs, but a good place to start is by including light manual browser testing and accessibility testing in the definition of done for every single new feature. Additionally, if possible, UI elements should go through design review before being merged into production, as this allows immediate revisions and fixes. And of course, every single pipeline should have some level of automated testing built in. These practices do add initial cost as each task requires more upfront. But I've found that the cost is reduced long-term in a product with less endgame bugs. By advocating to include these practices in our scope, product champions protect their teams from last-minute scrambles to fix a digital product. The worst thing that can happen from testing along the way is that a dedicated QA process finds fewer bugs in the application or website when they go to check at the end. And let's face it, no one was ever upset that a product was completed early. Product champions are advocates for quality digital product, but they also have a responsibility to the team producing that work. By clearly communicating metrics of success, protecting scope, and listening to the subject matter experts, product champions can create a sustainable, healthy development environment for the engineers they work with. Thank you for listening today. Here's my Twitter handle and my email address if you'd like to connect with me directly, and my slides are also available on SpeakerDeck if you would like to review those.